Okay, everyone. So last week we were really talking, we were going through sort of the basics of Adobe Animate. We were learning about, how to draw with the tool. So using, how to just set up a document, setting up, how to use brushes, fill and stroke, learning about the different types of animate objects, including shape, uh, what's primitive, object groups, things like that. This week, we're going to be finally getting into animation. Okay, so 2D animation has always been, we talked about this in the history of, you draw something again and again and again and again and again. So, the way I like to think of it, you ever made like a flip book? So it's like, here's this person, he's taking a piece of paper and drawing on it. And then he draws another character and he makes some changes. You can see how they're making changes in the arm here. So it's like, you draw something and you draw it again and you draw it again and you draw it again. And then you play it back, which I think he does here, maybe. There you go. So you draw a bunch of things and you slightly, make some slight changes to them, and that's how you make an animation. And so that's, what we're going to be doing today. Now, this is with paper, going back to, old Mickey Mouse cartoons and, Bugs Bunny. They didn't do it on paper. They would use acetate and use ink and paint to paint aspects and film them and things like that. That was the process. But this is kind of the same. What we're going to be doing is creating the same, method in Adobe Animate. Okay. So let's talk about the timeline in Adobe Animate. So these are the files for today. This is, I download the files. This is timeline basics. And if you open up exercise 1, down here, this is the timeline. We didn't really talk about the timeline last semester or last week, but this is our timeline and it marks the beginning, the middle, and the end of our animation. Okay. If you've never really done a video or an animation, you might not be used to the concept of time. Or in other words, your composition can change over time. So it's like, okay, um, here's this, animation, and it's like, this is the beginning, the middle, and then the end. This blue line here, this is what we refer to as a time marker. What does it do? Well, it marks where you are in time. Currently, we are at frame 20. Or if I move over here, we're in frame 5, okay? These numbers here, 5, 10, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, these are not seconds like you might expect from like a video, like a YouTube video or something. What they are is frames or pictures, okay? So we're going to learn how to create a bunch of pictures and then play them back through Adobe Animate. Here is actually where you can see the literal time in seconds. This is actually based on your frame rate, which we'll talk about today. So here's our timeline. If you want to see more or less of your timeline, there's actually this little slider in the upper right-hand corner. Slide it to the left, it kind of zooms out of your timeline and you can see more of it. Sliding to the right, zooms in on your timeline. If you click here, you can actually, make your timeline a little bit taller, if that makes sense for you. You can even do preview, and that actually shows you an example of your picture from frame to frame. I find that a little bit hard, so I'm just going to use standard. Okay. So this is a frame and it's a drawing. Okay. In this case, it's a single drawing. Think of it going back here as like this is the single drawing. Okay. If I want to make a new frame, I'm going to click in frame 2, and we're going to go to the inserts menu here, and we're going to go to timeline, and we're going to go to blank keyframe. Okay. If you have the function keys on your keyboard, that would be F7. Okay, I don't have functions in mind, but if you have an F7 function key on your keyboard, you can utilize that. So what happens is when I did that, it makes this empty circle. Okay, this is what we call a blank keyframe. The way to think of a blank keyframe is like getting a new piece of paper to draw on. So when this person gets a new drawing here, right? Before he's that is the new, that is the what's the word I'm looking for? That is the blank keyframe here. So I can come into here, and now that I have a new blank keyframe, I'm just going to draw something. So I'm just going to set up my brush, and I'm just going to grab a brush. It doesn't really matter what you draw, and we can set the size. I'm just going to make the brush a little smaller. Let's just use a regular brush. I'm just going to draw something. Okay. And now that I've drawn it and I let go, you'll notice that the circle's not empty anymore. It's solid. Okay. Why is it solid? Well, it's solid because it's not a blank keyframe anymore. It's a keyframe. It's full. Okay. So we have 1 frame, 2 frames. Okay. What I'm going to do, insert, timeline, blank keyframe. I'm going to make sure it's highlighted and draw something else. Okay. 1 frame, 2 frames, 3 frames. Okay. Another way to do this is you can right click, insert blank keyframe, draw into it, insert blank keyframe, draw into it. You can also just literally kind of insert a keyframe here. If it's already a blank spot, it'll just make a blank keyframe. So I'm just going to draw. It really doesn't matter what you draw at this point. I'm just playing it, adding in some frames. Now, in this case, I'm drawing a bunch of scribble lines or, nothing overly complicated. What you would want, if this was a real animation, you would be drawing a character. This would be Mickey Mouse or Bugs Bunny or Homer Simpson or whatever, in the same way that this particular person is drawing, an animation here. It would be kind of like that. Okay. So, can draw whatever I'd like. And I'm just going to keep drawing some, creating some blank keyframes and drawing into it. I'm going to go to about 15. Maybe I'll draw like a little face. All right, here's my animation. And I'm going to play, now that I have all these frames, I want to play this back. So what I'm going to do is take my time marker and draw it all the way back to the beginning of frame 1. And what I can do is now hit the play button. So hitting the play button plays my animation. Keyboard shortcut is to use the return or the enter key there. Now my animation keeps going because actually this layer is a little bit longer. So I only want to show from frame, 1 to frame 15. So what I'm going to do is I can create what's called a loop. A loop will loop just part of your animation. So when I click on this, you can see it gives me this blue highlight here. And I'm just going to start at frame 1, and I'm going to drag this to frame 15. And now when I play this, you can see it loops just within that particular range. Any point you can, click on these edges here to make them longer or shorter. Play back that animation. Okay. So that's kind of it. This is the basics of how to make a frame, a simple 2D animation. This is what we call frame by frame animation. Why? Because you're literally animating frame to frame to frame to frame. Okay. Now it's a little more complicated, or not a little more, but there's a little more to it. But this is the general idea of how this works. Now, one thing about animating is it helps to know what was happening previously in order to draw what's happening next. Okay. Most good animations, 2D animations, they exist in the realm of uh, reality. Okay. Which means that we want our animations to somewhat mimic the rules of reality. So what does that mean? Well, I have this snake character that's moving across the page, right? Now, normally when a character or, if we see a snake and it starts moving, it goes, a little bit at a time until it goes across the page or across the room or whatever. It doesn't just magically jump to different points. That's not how physics works, in real life. Maybe if the story is about the snake being magical, maybe then we can do that. But that's not, we wouldn't expect that. And if the snake starts moving around in a weird way, our mind is going to go, why is the snake doing that? That doesn't make any logical sense, right? So in order to have my snake move, I kind of need to know where it was before. Okay. Now, when I make a new blank keyframe, I can't really tell where it was before. I could try to like guess, kind of like do something like that, right? And then kind of look at it. I must admit, I don't really like that. So actually, there is a way we can help, which is to use what is called onion skin. Okay. What onion skin allows you to do is look at previous frames and look at forward frames. So I'm on frame 4. It's actually looking at frame 3 and 2. That's what's going on here. Okay. It can also look forward. This is what's going to happen. If you want, you can make this longer or shorter. Okay. I usually like to look behind, not forward, but there are sometimes you may want to look forward when uh, you're adding in something. So what I'm going to do is click in frame 4 here. I got my and I'm just going to make this a little bigger. I think this is like black, so let's make this like black. There we go. All right, there's that. And then I'm going to draw the next black or blank keyframe and kind of use that. Once again, it's like I kind of, I don't want this to be long. I want this to keep this the same volume. I don't want it to make it look like it's growing or shrinking. So I'm using this, onion skin to tell where I was. And so I'm just doing this. I want my character to go across the page. And at any point, you can always use other drawing tools that, I'm using the brush, but I could, if it's too long, I could use the eraser tool. So if I made this too long, it's like, that's too long. So then I would come back with like an eraser and tidy that up just a bit. All right, so I'm just drawing this. I'm just going across my page. All right, let me turn off this. Okay, that looks pretty good. So let's play this back, and I'm just gonna, oops, let's use the loop, and I'm just gonna loop it between here and here. Okay, so there's my animation. Now it's going a bit fast. If you didn't want it to go so fast, what I could do is put a, between here and here, you could put an extra one. So like, it took all of this and moved it. We'll talk about moving, and then added another one here. This is where it's like, okay, I'm looking forward, I'm looking backwards. By doing this, it's gonna, slow it down a little bit so it's not moving too fast. Okay. That's just the general idea. You draw something, you draw it again. We can use onion skin to tell where things were so we don't have them move too far away. Keeping, this gets into the concept of like physics and stuff like that. But that's kind of where we're starting from. Okay. So once you try that out, open up and, just try doing some basic frame by frame animation and playing it back through the timeline.